Are you thinking about retiring and considering a move to the state of Arizona? And perhaps you like Arizona, but you're not really sure where within the state is a good place, and you've seen Sedona, the beautiful pictures, and you're thinking what it would be like to live in Sedona? Well, today's video, I'm talking about the pros and cons of living in Sedona, and I am a Sedona resident, so I'm going to give you all the knowledge I have about living and retiring in Sedona. My name is Dawn Dickinson, and the channel is Living in Northern Arizona, where I teach everything there is to know about living in the northern half of the state. I am also a licensed real estate agent, and I sell real estate in mostly Sedona and Verde Valley, also Prescott, Flagstaff, sometimes in Phoenix. So if you ever have a question about buying or selling a home in Arizona, please reach out to me. My contact information is always in the description below. So let's start with the pros of living in Sedona, Arizona. The very first thing that drew me here and drew many of the residents here is just the breathtaking beauty. There are views from just about every place in the town, and if you don't have a view from your home, just step outside and take a little walk around the block. You will probably have a view of the breathtaking red rocks, or possibly the creek, or any of the other natural plants and wildlife and things that are abundant here in the city of Sedona. Also, you just drive to the grocery store. I drive from my home in the village of Oak Creek to West Sedona to go to the office or to pick up some groceries, and it's a beautiful drive where you look this way and see Bell Rock, you look on the other side and you see Cathedral Rock. So views just about everywhere you go, and it's very nice to live in such a tranquil, beautiful, breathtaking surrounding. Okay, number two pro, I am putting the weather. Now, the weather, it does get a little bit cold in the wintertime, but typically the average high in the month of July is about 92. Now, it does get a little bit hotter than that. It can get, the record high is about 110 degrees, although it does not reach that high very often. In the summers, a lot of the times, the temperature is in the mid to high 90s. The low average temperature in the month of January is about 32. It does occasionally get below freezing, but it doesn't get that bitter, zero, like you might see in some of the other parts of the country, or even in Flagstaff, Arizona. We get an average snowfall of about 11 inches, and typically a snowstorm will blow in, and in a couple of days it has melted. Usually it's melted by the next day. In fact, I've never had a time where I've not been able to get out of my driveway after a snowstorm, and we don't even typically have the streets plowed, because that's how little snow we get. Now, rainfall, we get about 23 inches per year, so it is still considered a dry climate, but again, much more precipitation than, say, in Phoenix. So number three pro living in Sedona is there's a lot of things to do. A lot of the residents are very avid hikers. There's so many hiking trails. There is a couple of hiking clubs if you want to get together with other people or meet other people who are into hiking. There's also a shuttle in the busy season that you could park your car and get a shuttle to any of the hiking trails and be with some other people. There's other things to do like sightseeing. There's a lot of tours. There are the Vortex tours. There's art. A lot of people are artists, but there's also a lot of art galleries, and if you like to take art classes, there are places that you can do that. Shopping, there's a lot of spiritual stuff, a huge spiritual community here in Sedona. You could go to the Center for the New Age. There are many spiritual type churches and regular churches too, if you like to get involved in spiritual activities. So there's an abundance of that going on if that's something you like to do. Also, people are into rock collecting and crystals, and it's a very dog-friendly town if you have some pets. Okay, number four pro to retiring in Sedona is there are going to be a lot of the residents that are going to be your own age. The median age in Sedona is 58.5. Now, there still are families and children in Sedona, but not a lot. A lot of the residents are retired. In fact, there are many residents who are part-time that stay in Sedona 6 months a year and maybe have another home in a different state for 6 months. There's also people like me. I actually have a second home in Phoenix, but I am in Sedona about 90% of the time. But for me, it's easy because I could just go to Phoenix for the weekend and have a second residence. So a very friendly area for part-time residents. And if you are out of town, there are businesses that will check in on your home, make sure the air conditioning is set right, make sure nothing is wrong, and will check in with you to make sure everything is okay while you're away. Pro number 5 to retiring in Sedona is there is a pretty fit population of older people. There are lots of activities that older people like to do that keep them fit because of the hiking. I do belong to a gym, but there are a couple of gyms here where I go, and everybody there is older than me, and I'm 60. So I see a lot of people that are older than me in better shape, and of course that's embarrassing, but it gives me an incentive to work out and to get more healthy. A lot of the grocery stores have a big selection of healthy organic foods that a lot of people are into making the good, healthy and fit recipes. So if one of your goals is to get fit, I know I have become in better shape since I moved to Sedona 6 years ago. So if that's one of your goals, or if you just want to stay fit, you already are, it's nice and easier to do that when you have other people living in the area who also have that as a priority. Number 6 pro to retiring is that Sedona is actually in a great location within the state. So we are in northern Arizona. We're about maybe an hour and a half from North Phoenix. So if you need to go to Phoenix, you can get to the airport in about 2 hours. But if you want to get to some of the doctors or shopping that's in Phoenix on the north side of town, you can get there in about an hour and a half. We're about an hour from Flagstaff. I can make it to Flagstaff from my home in the village of Oak Creek in less than an hour. We're about an hour to Prescott. So if you want to go there, you're still can get there pretty quick. And we are in a rural part of the state where there's still, not a huge population here, so it's not crowded all the time. That's a very nice draw. There are only about 10,000 residents in the city and maybe 16,000 total if you consider the city and the outlying area in the unincorporated areas. And we're about 20 to 30 minutes from Cottonwood. Now, Cottonwood is where you're probably going to go if you want to go to Walmart, if you want to go to Home Depot. There actually are some home supply stores, but like Home Depots and Walmart, there's a lot more shopping, and a lot of the doctors and medical facilities are in Cottonwood. So you're only 20 to 30 minutes, depending on where you are in Sedona, from Cottonwood. So again, it's a good location from the state if you want to go to Lake Powell, if you want to go to the Grand Canyon, if you want to do any of the natural sightseeing that's in Flagstaff. It's a very nice part of the state, and again, it's about maybe 2/3 of the way north of the state, and again, an hour and a half from Phoenix, where you're going to have anything you might possibly need is going to be in Phoenix. Okay, number 7 is we've got a small town vibe here in Sedona, despite the amount of tourism, which I'm going to talk about in a little bit. But again, the city of Sedona has less than 10,000 residents at this time, and maybe the outlying areas such as the village of Oak Creek or the Red Rock Loop, where you're outside of the city limits, you might have another 6,000. So it's a small town. You do get to know your neighbors who are living there. You get to know people when you go shopping. You can recognize who's a tourist and who's a resident pretty easy. So it is nice to have that small town vibe. All right, number 8 I touched on a little bit already is that Sedona is very friendly to seasonal or part-time residents. Now, the state of Arizona overall does get a lot of seasonal residents that are retired. We call them snowbirds, but basically people who live out of state and come to Arizona for maybe 6 months in a year. Now in Phoenix, this is very common in places like Mesa or Sun City or Sun Lakes, where they will come to Arizona all winter, go back to Minnesota or the Midwest or wherever during the summertime when it's super hot in Phoenix. Now there might be a little bit of a different mix of people in Sedona. They seem to be from all over the country, and even people out of the country or people from Phoenix that will stay here seasonally. But because of that, because you have so many seasonal residents, there are your neighbors are going to be friendly to that, and there are a lot of businesses that will help you look after your home when you're gone. So if you're thinking of maybe a part-time retirement in Sedona, we are very open to seasonal residents. Okay, number 9 pro, very advantageous, especially as you get older, is there is a low crime rate in Sedona. So if you look at crime statistics of Sedona and compare it to national averages, it's a little tricky because there are a tiny amount of data, but bestplaces.net and niche.com has the crime rate in Sedona, the property crime rate at 27.7, and you compare that to the national average is 35.4, so lower on property crime. And when you look at violent crime, the violent crime rate in Sedona is 13.8, and you compare that to the national average, which is 22.7, so lower on both property crime and violent crime, which makes you feel safe. I think it's actually even safer where I live in the village of Oak Creek, because it's a little bit away from all the population of the city of Sedona, but again, lower crime rate in Sedona, so you'll feel much safer. Okay, now let's start talking about the cons of retiring in Sedona. The first con is the con probably that gets most people or deters most people from living here, and that is the high cost of living. So the median sales price, or I should say right now, I looked it up 10 minutes ago, and the most recent data, which is mid-November 2024, has the median list price of homes in the entire Sedona city and rural area at $1.3 million. So it's going to be a little bit higher if you're within the city, 1.6 million, and slightly lower than that if you're in the village of Oak Creek at just under $1 million. But the cost of home prices is probably the biggest driver to the high cost of living. Now, if you see the cost of living index, which is published by bestplaces.net, where they do a evaluation of the entire country, and they have a cost of living index of 100 being the average, Sedona is at about 140, which is 40% higher than the national average. Now, the Sedona cost of living index is going to be almost on par with Scottsdale, Arizona. So if you've been ever looking at Scottsdale, just know Sedona cost of living of home prices and everything is going to be very similar to Scottsdale, Arizona. So the cost of living being high is the biggest deterrent for people moving and retiring in the city of Sedona. The second con to living in Sedona is that it is a tourist town. Very heavy tourism. Estimates have been from 2 to 4 million tourists every single year visiting Sedona. Now, I think it has gone down slightly since the pandemic, but there's going to be at least 1 million, as high as 2 to 3 million visitors every year. And so during the busy season, which would be March through May, and again September through about November, it's going to be very crowded with tourists. It means your traffic's going to be bad. It's going to be very busy on the trailhead. It's going to be hard to get a table at a restaurant. So just keep those things. If you don't like tourists, this might not be a town for you. Now, most of the time, I think the tourists are fine. Sometimes, though, they get a little bit cranky, especially like at the gas station and the grocery store as they're first rolling into town. They probably just had a busy flight and they're annoyed, and they get a little bit cranky if you can't get a pump. So sometimes the tourists are cranky, but most of the time I find them pleasant, and they seem to be very excited when they get to talk to the locals, because you know stuff and you can give them information on where a good place might be to go eat or what the best time would be to go hiking. But if you don't like tourists, we are heavy tourists, and that might bother you. So that's going to be my number 2 con to retiring in Sedona. Oh, and another thing to add to the con list is there are some neighborhoods that allow short-term rentals, so that you could have a vacation property next to your home if you buy in one of the areas that don't have an HOA. So if you don't like short-term rentals, they are very popular because of the high number of tourists that we see here in Sedona every year. Okay, number 3 con is going to be healthcare. A lot of people ask me, do we have a lot of doctors? Are there good healthcare facilities? So I'm going to say that within Sedona, actually, there are not a lot of doctors. There are some doctors. I have a great chiropractor here in the village of Oak Creek. There are doctors. There is the Northern Arizona Healthcare facility, one in the village of Oak Creek and one in West Sedona. There are quite a few doctors' offices, but the big hospital is going to be in Cottonwood, which is 20 to 30 minutes away, and a lot of the doctors' offices are going to be surrounding that hospital in Cottonwood. Also in Camp Verde, there's a big urgent care. There are some urgent care centers, but there's a little bit of a lack of healthcare options in Sedona Verde Valley. So if you have a serious medical condition and you need a specialist, probably going to end up going to either Phoenix or Prescott or Flagstaff. A lot of good doctors in Flagstaff. And again, in Phoenix, there's probably every medical doctor, specialty, hospital, care center that you could come think of. And so a lot of the rural communities, if you have something serious like that, you're going to end up going to Phoenix. Now, if you only go to the doctor, the specialist every 6 months, that's not a big deal. But if you are having a serious condition where you need to see a specialist every week, maybe Sedona will be a little bit too far from that for you. Number 4 thing I've seen people complain about is there's a lack of public transportation here in Sedona. There are a couple of shuttles that will shuttle you back and forth. Of course, there is a shuttle that will shuttle you back and forth between Sedona and Phoenix, or Sedona and Flagstaff. A couple of them within Verde Valley. I've seen them here in Sedona. Gonna be a hard time getting an Uber and something like that. Definitely not gonna get a taxi. So if you rely on public transportation, I would say Sedona's probably not gonna be a good option unless you have like a neighbor that can drive you around. But gonna be a hard time getting, like, not gonna get a taxi, hard time getting an Uber, and the public transportation, there's not like a bus line that goes through here. There are a couple of shuttles, but if you're relying on that, probably not a good choice for you. Okay, number 5. This is something that I struggle with. This is my biggest problem or difficulty living with Sedona. Is a lot of time you're going to move here and your family's going to be somewhere else. So my family is in Phoenix and Tucson, and because of that, I feel like, oh, I'm far from my family. Now, if you're coming with a spouse, or if your family is close, like your family is in Cottonwood, that's fantastic. But if you're moving here from out of state, it might be kind of tough because you're going to be far from your family, and you might not get to see your family as often as you would like. Now, me even being 2 hours from my family, I only see them every couple of weeks, and that's actually why I have a condo in Phoenix, so I can see my family more, because they probably only come up here once a month, every couple of months, and you end up missing them. So if you are really close to your family and you're the only one moving, you might struggle with that, unless of course they're close, like in Flagstaff or Prescott or Cottonwood, say. In my case, Phoenix, actually not that bad, because like I say, it's 2 hours away, and if I'm missing them and I have an appointment canceled in the afternoon, I can always throw a bag in the car and drive down and see them that day. But that is probably my biggest struggle of living in Sedona, is that I'm far from my family. And then number 6 con to living in Sedona is it does get cold in the wintertime. Now, it doesn't get that cold when you're looking at Flagstaff, say, or some of the other Midwestern towns, but I grew up in Phoenix, so for me, you know, the wintertime where it's snowing or it's 30 degrees overnight, to me that seems pretty cold. Now, I have gotten used to it and it's not that bad, but I do want to bring it up because I know a lot of people who are retirees don't like it to be cold at all, and that's maybe why a lot of them pick Phoenix or Valley of the Sun, because it doesn't get that cold at all. Again, it doesn't get that cold, but I just wanted to bring that up because relative to Phoenix or maybe Florida or California, it does get a little bit cold in the wintertime, and so I want you to keep that in mind. Now, I've got another con, number 7, that it gets a little bit warm in the summertime, which is usually not a problem. But there are quite a few homes that I've sold, even in the $1 million range, that don't have air conditioning. They will have like a swamp cooler. So if you were here full time, that could be a problem in June, July, August, where it gets pretty hot. Now, one thing I want to say is, if you do find a home you love and it only has a swamp cooler, doesn't have central air, the mini split is not a bad option. You could get one of those installed for not that much money, and mini split will cool the house quite nicely. But if you're moving into a home that doesn't have air conditioning, that could be pretty hot in the summertime. And especially swamp coolers are good when there's low humidity, but come mid-July and August and even into September, it gets a little bit humid. Now, when I say humid, people from Florida laugh at me because when it's humid here, it's like, 30% humidity, and I'm like, oh, it's so humid. But I know other people don't think it's that bad, but still, swamp cooler doesn't work that well when it's humid. Now, if you have central air, just turn the central air down and you are fine. But to go out hiking, it's going to be a little bit warm in the summertime. So again, it's hard to find something that's temperate all year long unless you're going to Hawaii. But in the continental U.S., I think Sedona is a good compromise where it's kind of like right in between. So that's all for today. My name is Dawn Dickinson, channel living in northern Arizona. If you enjoyed the video, please do me a favor and subscribe to the channel, because I post videos every single week about living in the northern Arizona towns. Also, consider giving me a like, and I hope to see you here next week. Now, remember, I am a licensed real estate agent in the state of Arizona, so if you have a question about buying or selling real estate, please reach out to me. My contact information is always in the description below, and if you give me a call or a text or an email, I will get back to you. So have a great week, and I hope to see you on the channel again next week.